Whoa, I just had the most awesome interview with Dave Rendall, and let me tell you, he drops gems, so many gems about his speaking career, how he did a TEDx talk, how he got started, what he was paid for his first engagement, how he raised his prices. Oh my goodness, there is a wealth of information in this interview. You're going to love it. So tune in and let's get started.
Welcome to the Speak Your Way to Cash podcast, a podcast where we teach speakers how to land paid speaking engagements and corporate contracts. Each week, we deliver high-quality content that teaches you how to level up your speaking business. Be sure to join the Speak Your Way to Cash Facebook group after having your mind blown by this information-filled episode. Now, here's your host, Ashley Kirkwood, lawyer and professional speaker. This is the Speak Your Way to Cash podcast.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us, David Rendall, on the Speak Your Way to Cash podcast. We're excited to speak to you today.
I'm excited to be here.
So, David, I saw you speak at TEDx McHenry. I thought you were phenomenal, but you have a really interesting backstory. How did you start your speaking career?
Yeah, so my speaking career sort of started by accident. My job initially, I worked at a nonprofit, and our goal was to help people with disabilities to get job opportunities. And it seemed like I should be involved in the community. So I got involved in the Chamber of Commerce, served on the board, joined the local leadership program. And then once I graduated, was on the board of the leadership program. And then once I was on the board, I started teaching leadership in the leadership program. And then one of the times we did a county-wide joint conference, and they asked me to speak at that event, and that led to other speaking engagements, all of which, again, were volunteer for free as part of kind of community outreach. I'd do a little 5-minute thing at the beginning of the Chamber of Commerce annual banquet and make some people laugh or whatever. And after I did one of the speeches for a local college, University of Wisconsin Parkside, it was on an obscure nonprofit topic about how nonprofits can make money to support their missions instead of just raising money. And this woman was part of the National Association of Court-Appointed Special Advocates. That's a mouthful.
Yeah,
and,
CASA.
Yeah. And,
I was a CASA. That's the only reason I know that.
Yeah. And she went back to her organization, and she told them that they should book me, and they booked me to do a breakout session at their conference. They apologized because they could only pay me $900 for an hour and a half talk, which was, $900 more than I'd ever been paid for a talk, and was $600 per hour, and for a talk I'd already prepared. I already had the slides. I already had done it, the exact talk. And that's when I found out there was a speaking business. And that was my first paid speech, and they paid all my expenses and all that. And I did it in Atlanta. And I even recorded it on audio so that I could use it in the future. And I think I sold some CDs for a while of that session. That was the beginning. That's part of how it got started. That's the very, very early stages. So a lot of it was by accident. In the beginning, I did not know there was I didn't know there was a speaking business. I didn't know there was a speaking industry. I didn't know that was one of my options.
Wow. And what did you go to school for?
So I've got 3 different degrees. So I went to school for psychology. I have an undergraduate in psychology. Then I have a master's in counseling psychology. And then I have a doctorate in management and leadership.
Awesome. Yep. And how did you find out that you wanted to speak about leadership? Did you kind of I know that you said it was by accident, but how did you even initially, even with the Chamber of Commerce organization, know that leadership was something that you could teach on?
Yeah, I was studying it. I was doing it. So really that was the main driver. Is I realized how helpful leadership seminars and books had been to me. And I was just trying to share what I knew with other people who hadn't read those books, hadn't gone to those seminars. Initially it was just kind of an outreach thing. It was kind of the do unto others kind of a thing. If it was helping me, I thought it could help other people. And I was passionate about it. I was reading books on it all the time. I was trying to get better. I was relatively young at the time and supervising people who were sometimes my parents' age. So I knew I had to be even better than average at it. And so I was just super passionate about the topic. And so I was talking about the things that I was spending a lot of time thinking and working on.
Were you also taking any training about how to actually give a good presentation or give a good talk, or did those skills also develop organically?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's part of what I actually talk about in my speeches is I think I've always had kind of a natural ability to communicate, but my whole life I've been told to sit still and be quiet and do what I was told. And so I'd always been suppressing that instead of using it. And so that's one of the other reasons it happened by accident, because my goal in groups and in public was to calm down, take it easy, not speak up. Not communicate too much, not take over. And yet I realized that even when I wasn't doing those things, people were sort of like, would sort of sense that, I guess, or something. I don't know. And so, yeah, that's, I think, what's interesting. Part of what I speak about is that I think we have unique gifts, and oftentimes we don't see those. And yes, dedication and persistence and all those things matter, but the reality is I'm a good speaker because I'm a good speaker, and I'm getting better because I do it more and things like that. But I've never been taught how to be a good speaker. I've never taken a class on how to be a good speaker. I've never gone through a program on how to be a good speaker. And I would have never had any of the opportunities. I just did a talk in New Zealand. That's a referral that goes all the way back 15 years to my first talk in Australia. And if I wasn't good enough at that talk in Australia to get a referral, I wouldn't have gotten that talk in 2019. So I've always been good. You can always get better, and I've definitely gotten better, but I also don't think I've necessarily gotten better by studying speaking itself as much as I've gotten better by studying my topic, studying my area, becoming more knowledgeable in those kinds of things. And so I think there's a certain amount of some things, and it's not just speaking, but any kind of skills where some people start with a natural advantage, just like some people are more coordinated and better at sports. Some people understand science initially. And it's not that other people through hard work and dedication can't get there. But that's part of what I'm talking about is nobody recognized that in me. I didn't recognize it myself. And so for a long time, it went unused when one of the best things about me was I was good at communicating things to other people. Even in college, for example, I was a teacher's assistant, and we didn't have one of those kind of schools where the TA taught classes. But one time the professor was going to be gone for statistics class, and he had me do a day of statistics class. And even a couple of my fellow students were like that. I learned more today than I learned, in that guy's class. So there's something about the way I do things or the way I think that helps me teach things to people who don't understand it.
Great. And so after your first speech, you mentioned that was your first speech. It was $900 engagement. Did you then immediately decide, okay, I'm going to build a business based on speaking because this is out here? Or was it more of a process even after that?
Oh, yeah, it was still definitely a process because that speech didn't necessarily cause a cascade of referrals. It was a very niche sort of thing. Mm-hmm. I had just become a college professor by then. And so I got that call after I'd already become a college professor. So my initial goal was to create a consulting business. I thought that's kind of what you do. I knew I wanted to start a business and write a book. I didn't know speaking was a thing at the time. So my initial idea was consulting, like helping people with strategic planning, leadership development, things like that. As I did more of that, I realized that had a lot of the elements of management that I didn't enjoy and that I wasn't the best at. Started doing more training, and I liked that even more because that was more like speaking. Mm-hmm. And then after doing the trainings for corporations and things like that, and doing breakout sessions at events, I got my first keynote. And once I did my first keynote, I was like, oh, that's the thing. That's the thing for me. That's the perfect situation. And that's when things started rolling, is once I got in front of more people, once I was doing my, 1 hour, 1.5 hour keynotes, because there's people who are better trainers than me. There's people who are better facilitators than me. There's people that are better professors than me. But when I have 60 to 90 minutes to get up there and put on a show, I can outperform or at least hang with most people. I'm not being beaten, but there's definitely people who their unique strengths and weaknesses that they have make them better at facilitation, for example, getting everybody engaged or getting everybody talking or gathering everybody's information. I'm more of a one-directional kind of a person more than that. And so the keynote is a perfect fit for me when it comes to my style, my particular strengths and weaknesses.
So you mentioned that you thought about starting a consulting business. And I know a lot of people who go into consulting, and that's such a broad field. And one of the questions that I'm always getting is, okay, well, it seems so easy because maybe, well, I'm a lawyer. So like, oh, you're a lawyer. It's easy for you to just go into corporations and talk to companies. And maybe for you, you're a professor. So it would seem like that would be a smoother transition possibly because you have some of those credentials. But how did you get your first client in the consulting business, your first corporate client? How were you able to achieve that? Was that a referral or was that something that you had like a sales strategy?
Yeah, it's going to sound like a broken record. So really everything I've ever done has come from a free talk that I did.
Nice.
So I was a college professor. I had just started teaching at the school. And so the lady who was the director of the alumni board, the person whose responsibility that was, said, we're doing an alumni board meeting on a Saturday morning. You know, you're new. Like she probably asked everybody and she'd run out of people to ask. So I was new. She's like, you're new. Will you come and do a talk about change for the alumni board at the college? So I came in on a Saturday morning for free. Just to be a good employee, to help out a coworker. And I talked to, 10 people about change. And one of the guys was a COO from a bank. And he said, hey, can you help us with strategic planning? And at that point, I was like, I could have easily made, probably the biggest mistake of my life because my initial response was, no, I'm not a strategic planning expert. I don't have a consulting company yet. But I thought about it. I'm like, well, I do strategic planning. I teach strategic planning. And I used to, as a manager, oversee strategic planning. I've studied strategic planning and I plan in my own life. So yeah, I can help you. And he said, okay, send me a proposal. So I went back to my office and I Googled proposal.
Okay.
And I called a friend of mine, a family friend who'd done bank consulting, just to see if I could get any tips. And I sent him a proposal. And they said yes. And then I had to figure out how to do what I put in the proposal, right? I had to figure out what kind of survey we were going to do and what kind of assessment we were going to do and what I was going to do for 4 hours at that meeting with employees that I'd scheduled. And then that ended up being like a 10-year engagement. And that guy's still my friend. And he's the chairman of the board of the college now. And so that was the same thing. And then that consulting engagement with them led to other consulting engagements and also other speaking engagements through my relationships there. But yeah, that's the story of every major thing that I've ever done is for me, I think one of the things that a young speaker has to figure out, not young as in age, but a new speaker has to figure out is how do you get clients? Not how do you wish you got clients, but how do you get clients? And however you get clients, double down on that. And so over the years, I've stopped doing anything really other than doing speeches. When I do speeches, I get speeches. I blogged for 3 years. No one ever read my blog and was like, oh my gosh, we have to get this guy. As far as I know,
that's what they say. You better make sure you're blogging 50 times a day.
No, absolutely not. And that's the thing. I'm busier than most speakers. I'm just as successful or more successful than most speakers. And I literally don't do anything that any of those people do. I speak. If you do a good job speaking, speaking will lead to more speaking. Now, other people are going to have different strengths, though. Maybe you're a great writer, then write. Maybe you're great like with interviewing people and connecting with people and sharing your message, and you're super organized and you're good at managing that. Do podcasts, or do videos of you, these people driving down the street and stuff like that, or interviewing interesting people. Whatever works for you, do it. But be careful that you're not doing things that everybody else says works. And doesn't work for you. And so I know that the reason I'll still do a free speech, even though I get paid much better than that for a speech, is because I know that getting in front of people is the best way for me to get customers. And so I still do them now on select basis. If somebody says, can you travel halfway around the world to do a free speech for us, and talk to 7 people who don't have jobs, I'm probably not going to do that because that doesn't have a high potential unless I do it as a charitable act sort of thing.
Well, that was actually something I wanted to point out is that every time you've explained the free speeches that you've done thus far, they've been for very targeted business-oriented organizations, an alumni board, the Chamber of Commerce. I've done a lot of work with our small business associations to other business owners. And for my legal practice, that's been how I've gotten larger contracts with brick and mortar businesses. And it's been almost instant. I did a free talk and within a day, I had a $5,500 contract, like the next day. Just the first one. And there were several that came after that. And so I don't think people should get caught up on free. It doesn't always mean unpaid, but it does sound like you're strategic in that they're for the right audiences as well.
Yeah. And but also too, if you're not doing a free one and you're not getting paid to do them, then you're not doing anything. So how are you getting better? How are you improving your message? Right. So at some point, you're saying you're a speaker, but you're not speaking, right? You're not you're not doing your talk and finding out what's the feedback that you get. What is this thing that people heard based on what you thought you said? I wrote a kids book because so many people came up to me afterwards and talked to me about their kids, even though I was talking to them about management and talking to them about how to make their organization better. But part of my message was really resonating with them as parents and as spouses. Hey, can I take this home to my wife? Can I take this home to my husband?
Yeah.
I added a section in the book on marriage and parenting only because I was getting that feedback from people. I wasn't some marketing genius who was like, oh, I know what the world needs.
Yeah.
And so I think you have to be, and being a college professor, that gave me hours and hours and hours, and a corporate trainer gave me hours and hours and hours in front of people. I mean, we've all heard, I disagree with it a little bit. We've all heard you need 10,000 hours of practice. You at least need some practice, right? You're not going to be a good speaker the first time you get up there and you start talking about something.
I agree.
So I think that's the other role of free talks. And that's the other thing to have, things like a book or something like that. There's no such thing as a free talk if you have a book. You can do with the talk, sell your books, and you can at least make some money from selling your books or selling some kind of resource that you have.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. And so essentially, your sales strategy is doing these talks in front of the audiences that can potentially hire you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, certainly I get referrals, and I think you get better referrals from paid talks because when you're getting paid talks, people know you're getting paid most of the time, and you're in front of the kind of people who are probably likely to pay you again. One of the weaknesses of free talks is that sometimes if you don't do it right, you're in front of the kind of people who then want you to do another free talk and another free talk and another free talk. And so you certainly, that's a mistake I think people make too. Like, oh, I'm going to do this for exposure. What they don't understand is you get exposure when you're getting paid for a talk too, right?
Yeah.
And so you don't have to be doing the free talks, but I think you have to figure out like, what's your best way? Some people are great writers and it's not even their blog. People are going to read your book and be like, wow, we need this person to come speak at our event. For me, it's the reverse. People see me speak and they want my book. But very rarely, I don't think ever, as somebody said, I got a copy of your book and I need to hire you as a speaker. It doesn't, in my experience with my particular style, my biggest strength is the speaking part. And I think that's where people have to decide even what kind of speaker are they going to be.
Right.
Some people think I'll be a keynote speaker because that's the highest paid or that's the most prestigious. But some people, that's not their style. They would be a really good trainer. Mm-hmm. They are really good at putting together training materials and writing those books and doing those kinds of things, or somebody else is just more of an expert and they can deliver information, but they're not entertaining or interesting enough sort of to be a keynote speaker. It's not a less than or more than, it's what your fit is. For me, I know that I'm not bad at, but I'm not as good at doing those trainings because people want more detail. They want more practical assistance.
Right.
They want it to get to a really fine level that I'm not comfortable getting to. I like the big ideas.
That makes a lot of sense. And now when you do your free talks, are you asking anything of them in return? So I still send out agreements for the free talks and then they know what the rate is. And I typically just write it off and send them an invoice with it written off. But are you requesting anything on the front end when you do those talks? Are you having the conversation that ordinarily this is paid, but I'm willing to donate this talk? Or is it just like, I'm just going to go give this free talk? Do you make the request in the beginning?
No, I don't do anything like that. I'm a little strange that way. Like, I don't even tell people I'm selling books. I mean, my general perspective is that if people like it, they're gonna seek you out, and no one ever misses me. I'm 6'6". Nobody ever gets lost in the back of the room. I don't ever require them to do things. Maybe I should. One thing I have started doing recently, if it's a low paid talk, like a massive discount or a free talk, is I won't commit to it until much closer to the date. So let's say, okay, it's May 28th. So let's just call it June 1st. Let's say somebody says, Dave, on November 15th, we'd love to have you come out and talk to our group. And we don't have a budget. It's just 12 of us. And but we're doing this good work and we're this nonprofit or something like that, or we're this board. And we just love to hear your message. We think it would be really helpful. Mm-hmm. And we can't pay you, or we can pay you $150 or something, right?
Okay.
Either way, what I would tell them is I will put that date on my calendar. And if it is still available 60 days out, right? So September 15th, then I will commit to it. But right now, I am not going to lock in a date because someone comes along, offers me my full fee on that same day. I'm going to honor my commitment to that original person that I told could pay me $150 just to help them out. And I'm going to lose out then on that thousands of dollars that I could have made. And I think that's a fair thing and it makes it seem reasonable. And I just explain to people straight up. I say, look, I have an airplane. It has one seat. Once I sell that flight, I can't sell anymore. And so once I sell you November 15th for $1, I can't sell it to somebody for $10,000. And I said, so I'm not going to do that. And what I found is oftentimes I did that once, and it was for May, and May is a really busy time of year for me. It was like May 6th. And so 2 months came and I couldn't do it. And I called them up and I said, I can't do it. And they go, oh, okay. What about the 13th or the 20th?
Yeah.
And then we found one that was available. It was only 2 hours from my house. They were still paying something. I forget what it was. And plus I could sell some books. And plus I was helping out. It was like a governmental social services organization.
Yeah.
So I was happy to help. But I wasn't going to cost my family thousands of dollars in order to do it. And so then they were flexible. They moved their thing to match my thing. And then everybody wins, right? And so I just try to be real honest and upfront about those kinds of things. So that's one of the ways I handle free talks, but I don't put a lot of stipulations or anything else on it. To do them. And I'm not saying you shouldn't. And again, that's one thing I'd say about this whole thing. My way isn't necessarily the right way or the best way. I think sooner or later what speakers have to figure out is, what is their way? Are you super organized? Are you super good with the details? Are you super good? I mean, you're a lawyer, right? With agreement and organization, and you have specific requirements and you're going to follow up on those requirements. For me, I'm unlikely to do that. And plus, I'd rather not. It's already a free talk. Why do I want to do paperwork for it?
Right.
So, I'm bad at paperwork, but that doesn't mean the paperwork doesn't work. It just means I don't do paperwork if I can avoid it, Yeah.
And that's a really good point. It's like the way that I think about things is because I am a lawyer, right? So like, I'm going to think about things very differently. And then plus, when you get your system set up, you just send them, you do it so much, you just send them the agreement that you do for the free talk. But yes, but hopefully everyone is at least using some contracts, and I'm sure you do for your paid talk as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
You mentioned your pricing, which is the other big question that speakers have. How did you set your pricing in the beginning, and when did you know to raise it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So my original pricing for the consulting was, I realized I could make $85 an hour when I was teaching extra classes as a college professor, right? They'd pay me $1,700 to teach approximately a 20-hour class. It was 5 weeks, 4 hours at a time. And obviously you have driving and grading and some other stuff, but whatever, I kind of averaged it out to $85 an hour. So it's like, if I can't charge the client at least $100 an hour, then I might as well not even be doing this. I might as well just teach more classes, right? Okay. There's no reason to do it. And so that was the initial thing, was just based on what I could currently get for some other kind of work, right? If I can do other work for $85, why would I charge the client any less than that when it's harder to run a business than it is to just teach an extra class for an existing employer?
Yeah.
And then initially when people would ask me to speak, I didn't know what to say. So oftentimes I would say, like, what's your budget? And they'd go, oh, $500. And I'd be like, oh, okay, sure. Sometimes they would volunteer it, like I told you with my first talk. And so early on, it was like $250, $500. It was $1,000. But once I got $1,000 for like a breakout, then when the same company came back and wanted me for a keynote, I figured a keynote must be worth more.